So, Matthew, why don't you tell us a little bit about the research project you did? Could you maybe give me, I don't know, a 30-second summary for the group so they understand the task
Yeah.
that I gave
So
you?
what we really wanted to look at first, right, because we want to make data-driven decisions, we were looking at a lot of the engagement rates or how many likes and all of that stuff, right, that these big companies were getting. And truthfully, a lot of that data you won't be able to really accurately get because I'm not on their social media
It's
team, right?
changing.
And so
Yeah.
I think TikTok and X or Twitter were the only ones that really gave me the reach that every post was getting. Um, and I found that a lot of these social medias are pretty lackluster. And so I kind of shifted, and instead of doing just focusing on likes and things like that, I kind of wanted to see the trends of what was actually working.
Mm.
So less about post frequency. And I really wanted to see the comments of the sections and see what people were really talking about, right? Because it can have 500 comments, but if they're all bad,
Yeah.
is that really good
We hate
engagement?
you.
Yeah, exactly. And there
Fair,
were
good
there
point.
were a good amount like that, to be
Yeah.
frank.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so I really wanted to see what type of content was working with connecting with an audience. And so I guess I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I'll just step back. So at the end of last year, my task for Matthew was to go and look at, I think we started with 10 big companies that are mostly B2B, like industrials, like I
Mhm.
think Caterpillar, John Deere, companies like that. Then we looked at a bunch of B2B tech companies, like AT&T and T and IBM and guys like that. And then we said, okay, and we learned some stuff. And so Matthew, he's doing a good job of giving us some insight. And then we're like, well, I wonder what an average small company is doing, like a little bakery or something like that. And we looked at some other brands. And so it turned out to be like, how many companies do you think you looked at, Matthew?
I looked through, I mean, I really looked through 40. Um,
40.
and
Wow.
then I mean more just casually, right? And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna do this one. Eventually I was like,
Yeah.
as you look through all of these social media pages, you realize that it feels like it's copy pasted from the previous.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
for the
Same
most
kind
part,
of thing.
it's like
Yeah.
95%, and that's not a real stat, don't quote me on it, right? It's that just a
Fair
vast
enough.
majority of these companies,
Hmm.
um, the way that they run their social media is so devoid of personality. It's like they treat
Hmm.
it like it's a catalog, and they're
It's a
just
necessary evil. Yeah. They're like,
but
okay, checking
social
boxes.
media is interesting because it allows you to connect with
Hmm.
your target market in a very different way, right? We're
Yeah.
going back to building a almost like you can build like a almost personal type of feeling relationship on
You
social
could.
media. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing to consider when you are running your own.
I love it. Yay. See, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but I love it. I
Oh,
think it's good.
sorry.
Okay. So thank you for that. That was perfect. So what I like to do is before we get into the depth of the conversation, and guys, today's conversation is always, as always, an open discussion. So for the folks in the room, if you want to raise your hand, ask a question, or participate in any way beyond watching the conversation, then please feel free. Just raise your hand. We'll add you into the panel. Or you could post a question. Sandy's monitoring the chat, and we'd be happy to discuss your conversation. If you're in the live stream and you're watching us, hi, and you have a question as well, just post it in the chat, and Sandy should be monitoring that too. And if we take a little bit of time because we got distracted, don't worry. We'll definitely follow up with you and answer your question if you have any. Okay. So what we did is when people registered for this event, we asked them two questions. So let me get that data and let me actually share it. This is probably one of the few things that we will share. Let me see. All right, here we go. Okay, so two questions. And I think it's helpful because it gives us a little background, right, on who we're talking to or who, and it's actually very in line with what Matthew was talking about. So we asked everyone, we had 60 people register for today. We asked everyone, okay, what social media are you using? Where is your company listed and active? And so a lot of people are on LinkedIn, as you would expect, right? The next one I thought was really interesting. YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. A lot of our partners have YouTube channels, so companies have YouTube. Whether you get a lot of subscribers or engagement is a whole nother thing, but a lot of us have video assets and we like to put them on YouTube. Very interesting. A lot of folks are on Instagram, but not a lot, but the next one is Instagram and then Facebook. Everything else is down from there, right? Reddit, X, TikTok, WhatsApp. So LinkedIn is definitely now our audience always when we're recruiting or when we're signing people up for these events, it's almost always B2B companies, small business, tech companies. So I'm not surprised that LinkedIn, which is supposed to just be one word, y'all, is top. But I am surprised that LinkedIn is so big where everything else is so small. It's not shocking to me because when I talk to clients, a lot of them are like, "Oh, my customers aren't on Facebook," for example. So we're going to talk about that in a second. The second one is, okay, you're on social media, you're on LinkedIn, for example. What do you get from being up there? And so most of them, more than half, say, hey, brand visibility, couldn't agree with you more. It's a great place for people to find your brand. The next one is enhanced customer engagement and interaction. And then the last one will be broader market reach. But for the most part, people aren't getting a lot, like what you said, Matthew, they're not getting a lot of engagement, right? They're not necessarily gathering audience insight. They're not necessarily doing a lot of advertising so far, at least for this group that we've surveyed today from social media. So let's talk about that. So here's the thing, and I get it. If you sell to businesses, then you might be like, why on earth would I be on Facebook or Instagram or even Reddit or X or any of these things? Because it's hard to target your market. You're like, I only want to talk to people in this industry, and I only want to talk to companies that have this many employees, right? And you just can't do that, with their advertiser tools, even though they're really sophisticated. But there's some new tech that's come out in the last couple, 3 years where you now can do that using what's called a third party audience or ID graph, or whatever you want to call it, account based, ABX, account based experiences, whatever you want to call it. There's tech that allows you to do it. It costs money, it's not free. Some of them cost a lot of money, and so depending on how much you're investing or doing running in ads, it's you got to figure out, what's the benefit. So in simple logic, I'll put it to you this way: from what we've learned, and we've done some tests, and we'll show you some of that a little bit later on. If you're spending like, $1 million a year, which most of us don't, even if you spend $500,000 a year, then it might be worth it for you to invest in one of these, audiences, ID graphs. There are a bunch of them, 6sense, Demand Base, Marketing OS from ZoomInfo, which is the newest, 5 by 5, Habu. There's different ways you can get access to the ID graph. And that's basically where, this audience provider has mapped the IP addresses of loads and hundreds of millions of people in a particular geo, and they've mapped that back to an email address in a company. So when those people hit your website or when you create an audience, then you can take that information that you never get from them, but they have it, and build that audience, even though you don't know the person's LinkedIn profile or their Facebook profile, what have you. You know that it's that IT manager or that, chief marketing officer or whoever it was that you're trying to reach and build in your audience. It's extremely helpful. So you might be like, well, Nico, why would I do that? A lot of these platforms cost six figures, 100 grand. Some of them, depending on what you buy, maybe it's 20 or 30 grand for the year, but it is not a small investment. So it's probably not something that a really small advertiser would do. We have worked where we gave access to our ID graph to small clients for hundreds of dollars a month, so very little. But even that is, it's a economics question, right? Volume versus value. So you might be like, well, Nico, why would I do this if it's so expensive? Well, the thing is, what you may be finding is that LinkedIn is incredibly expensive compared to other platforms. So it's something like 6 to 1 in some cases You know, you spend $1 on LinkedIn, you would get $6 worth of value on Facebook. So if you had an audience of maybe 300,000 people, and you could use your ID graph to reach those people on Facebook, you could reach them for a sixth of the price that you would pay to reach those people on LinkedIn. And I'll show you some data later on. They probably would be more engaged, and you would most probably get more yield for your results if you used a platform like Facebook, for example. So it's a question of reallocating your ad dollars. So you invest in the IV graph, you reach the more people in your audience using a different platform, and that's how you would actually save money. So you wouldn't have that high cost. The other thing that it does, a lot of these platforms connect into like Google Ads and Google Display Network, things like that. They allow you to reach other platforms like display ads and mobile apps and stuff that you might not be able to do just through LinkedIn alone, even with LinkedIn's audience network. And then lastly, um, bots, right? So that's a big one, guys, and you might be dealing with it. But the last stat that I saw last year was something like 30% of ad dollars are actually going to bots because bots are out there clicking your ads. And isn't that terrible? So if you spend, $1 million, that's $300,000 a year is just bot traffic. And so you spend 100 grand on your ID graph, you reduce your bot traffic down, so you save 200 grand, right? You get more yield, you get probably improved results for actually spending less in your ad dollars. Now you might be like, why are you saying that? Because don't agencies want more and more of my money? Of course they do. I mean, of course the other guys do. Um, Over here at Change 3, we're focused on, results, right? So if you spend a $10,000 or $5, right, we want to give you the best results. So that's the first tip. So the second thing is uh, hacks, right? So it's like, okay, why do I do this ID graph? And I can use these consumer platforms to get more engagement. But let's talk about it. So Matthew, in your research project, one thing that piqued my interest when we went over the results is you said Facebook seems like the platform that companies are becoming the least engaged on. Is that true?
I wouldn't necessarily say least engaged on, but when I was looking at, I think it was a few big four accounting firms. I think it was like KPMG or Deloitte or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, for some reason, they weren't active on Facebook like at all. They had a few million followers
Anymore.
still,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
for some reason, they decided to reallocate their assets to focus on other platforms. And Facebook was,
Interesting.
I guess, yeah, the first to go.
Wow. Wow. Well, Facebook is the oldest, right? The
Mm.
oldest
Yeah,
social
yeah,
network.
it was the first one, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be, and for the group, right? For the group, what do you guys think? Do you think Facebook is old and stanky? 4 or 5 years ago, people were like, "Oh, that's what my grandma's on
Yeah,
Facebook." So really young kids are like, "Oh no, Facebook's not cool." And so it's like it's us Gen X and the boomers and stuff that are like, "Oh, Facebook," right? And it's already old, you know.
yeah. I haven't logged into
But
Facebook in
Facebook owns
forever.
Instagram,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Right.
Yeah,
A lot of younger people. But Instagram and Facebook actually have integrated ad tools. So in
right.
case you're wondering,
Mhm.
right? Instagram though. So talk to me, my dear. Would you say Instagram is like really popular with Gen X, or what are you guys, Gen Z or millennials or
I'm
whatever it
Gen
is?
Z. Yeah, I'm one of the
Okay, okay,
older Gen Zs.
okay,
I'm at
okay.
the very start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that it a lot of companies are on Instagram, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it does seem like their engagement is quite high for the most part.
Higher. Sure,
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
and obviously there's a lot of factors, right? But yes, you can get a whole lot of engagement on Instagram.
Okay. And even a lot of younger people, like that's what they give when they meet people. They're like, "Yeah, here's my ID," right? They don't give you their
Oh
phone
yeah,
number.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I
It's
feel
like
like I
this is how
give
you
out
can reach
my
me.
my Instagram more than I do my phone number. A phone number feels
That
a little
is
more personal
crazy.
than than my
Right.
Instagram,
You
right?
gotta that's like, we real friend, we really close at that point when you get my number. It's very interesting. So let's talk about that, guys. So maybe you're skeptical, you're like, I'm B2B. I don't know if I want to do Facebook or Instagram. So like I said, this is not a question of is this a place where your customers are? Because they are. Facebook has 3 billion users. That's almost half of the world's population. Majority of it is in Western cultures. And yes, there's duplicate accounts and all that sort of stuff. But for the most part, the people who you want to sell to, those IT managers, the CEOs, the executives, their staff, their managers, everybody, they have a Facebook profile. Whether they're active on it is a whole nother question. But they are on Facebook, and many of them are on Instagram, and a lot of them are on TikTok, and a lot of them are on X. So they're in those places. So the question is, do you want to try to reach them there? That's the question for everyone to ask themselves. We did do some research, and you guys can access this report, and I'll flash it on the screen a little bit. But I don't want this to be a slideshow. Um, But what we found is that if we took $100 and we took three audiences, government workers, IT professionals, and business executives, and we had a series of ads, the same ads, and we presented them on 5 networks: Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and True Social. And we used our ID Graph tools to take those audiences and access two of the three, LinkedIn and Facebook, and we loaded our list on 4 of the 5. Oh, did I say 2 of the 3? 2 of the 5. We loaded our list into 4 of the 5, and one of them you couldn't use any tools. You couldn't load lists. You couldn't do anything. That was True Social. But what we found is that in the case of Facebook, it was like a 900% increase in your match rate. So if you upload a list of 100,000 IT professionals, you might match about 5,000 of them or so, roughly, maybe 3 or 4,000. But if you used an ID graph, you'd probably find maybe 30 or 40,000 of them. And so it's still not 100%, but that 30 or 40,000, now you're talking a realistic audience, an audience that you might be communicating with using email. And if you're doing that, now you can amplify your email message with some social ads that literally cost pennies on the dollar. So I spent $89, people, $89, and we got something like 100 and something thousand impressions. We got like 163, visits to the web page, and some amount of engagement. It's in the report. But the point is, like, those are not huge numbers of web traffic, but it was basically less than $1 per click, and per real click, right? And we know these are real people; they're not bots, because we had a tailored audience. So it was like that right there is the kind of thing that I would encourage all of you guys to be thinking about. So if you're already doing social media advertising and you're already investing in it, then definitely looking at some of the latest tech and ABX, where you can reach a specific audience and use these ID graph tools to reach that audience in consumer platforms, is absolutely a smart strategy, because it's going to cost you way less, and you're going to reach them more effectively, and it'll absolutely amplify the things that you're used to doing, like email and even phone calls. So super duper strongly recommend that, and it really does help. Um, so Matthew, let's talk about it. What are those platforms? So you looked at, like, what was it, 8 or 9 social platforms? Could you walk us through the ones that you were looking at?
Yeah, yeah. Well, gosh, I looked at just about every platform. I feel I looked at even the
Hmm.
newer ones like Blue Sky. I looked at just
Could
to
you
see if
list
there
them?
was
Yeah, yeah.
any presence there, which
Anything on there?
there weren't.
Yeah,
There weren't.
there wasn't. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not much on like Truth Social or anything. The biggest ones were your obviously LinkedIn, your
Hmm.
Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and then TikTok here and there.
Yeah.
Which is technically, I don't know, is it banned? You can use it, but you
That's a
can't
good
download
question.
it. Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
on the App Store anymore, I know.
yeah,
But I guess it still works in the US.
sure.
Um, but yeah, it was
Did
it
you
was
you looked at Reddit too, right?
yeah, not much on Reddit.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So what is
Yeah.
that? Eight of them?
Well, I think that's
LinkedIn,
what is
Facebook,
that's
Instagram,
6
YouTube, TikTok, Blue
and X.
Sky, Truth, Reddit. That's not
Oh, I mean,
6.
oh no, I'm saying that the people were mostly active on 6, 5 or
Okay,
6,
so six of
right?
the
The
eight.
people were mostly active on those. And then, I mean, all of the other ones, yeah, very, very few,
Okay.
to be
So,
honest.
so for you, if you're deciding, okay, which platform should I be on? Definitely the big three, LinkedIn, Facebook, X. Reddit is an up and comer, what we find. They've got some really good, sophisticated ad tools. And it's a different experience though. And so it'll definitely require a little bit of a change in what you post. It's got a spicy community, very active, great ad
Oh yeah,
tools.
and I guess let me I guess expand on my answer to your previous
Sure.
question. These are just people
Yeah.
with like actual accounts that
Yeah.
are posting and trying to organically get, I
Hmm.
guess, reach their audience, right?
Hmm.
I can't say that these companies aren't running advertisements on Reddit, right? They might just not
Good
have like
point.
a legitimate profile that they actively post on, or a
Yeah.
Reddit page that they post on, right?
Yeah.
But they could still be running ads on these
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point. You actually have to have a page to run ads, but you could have a page with nothing on it. And I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
that a
Yeah.
lot of people do that, that we're starting to see that. But Reddit's come out hard in the last few years to talk about how they've got the most engaged community, even though it's one of the smaller ones. They spend a lot of time talking about they get the better ad yield, better ad
Mhm.
engagement. So if you're out there and you've been doing the LinkedIn thing and you're like, man, it's so expensive, what are some options? Definitely X, Reddit, and Facebook and Instagram are
Yeah.
really good next steps for you. If you're a small company, you're like, I don't do me no social media marketing right now, or I don't know what to do. Where do I get started? Here's some tips. So first things first is $5 a day on follower ads. That'll go a really long way on like Facebook and Instagram and places like that. Come up with something really good, not clickbait or anything. Really talk about, what your brand is about in terms of what you're going to do on your page. Are you going to share data? Are you going to share quotes? Are you going to share information? Why should they choose to follow you in those platforms? And think about what your audience would want. So for example, I love to do this. Maybe your company makes rubber gaskets and you're like, who wants to learn about rubber gaskets on Facebook? Well, maybe a very small amount of people, but how you source the rubber, right? Is it sustainable? The impact of rubber products on the environment, the things you guys are doing to have a positive impact, right? There's all kind of stuff like that. Sustainability, corporate responsibility, climate, all that sort of stuff. You could have an angle about that because you guys make those rubber gaskets, right? And what you're doing in other nations and all that sort of stuff. So that could be the flavor that you take for your, social platforms, especially outside of a LinkedIn where you might be talking more about your products. And those sorts of things are very interesting to like Gen Z or Gen Alpha or whomever because they care about that kind of stuff. They care about your corporate social responsibility. They care about what you're doing to be sustainable. They care about how, maybe a rubber product is better than a man-made polymer or whatever, or vice versa. Whatever the position is, you can definitely find an angle to make it relevant to humans, not just business people. And remember, we talked about how business people are on those platforms as humans, right? Right? There's no such thing as two selves. It's just one person and
Yeah.
just different facets of the same person. So I would strongly encourage you to rethink that if you're thinking, oh no, I don't need to be on this platform, or I don't have anything to say on this platform. I think you do. It's just a matter of creativity and strategy, and you could definitely say something that would resonate with the audience. A couple of
Yeah.
other
And
things. So yeah, please join in.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think one really interesting thing about Reddit is that it does have really niche communities. And
It
so,
does. And
even if it's just
they go
speaking of
in, right?
exactly,
They
yeah,
go in there
like I
hard.
mean,
Yeah.
really niche communities, it seems.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
even if you
They're
just make
very
a
active.
personal account and want to check it out and see if it's worth, your time on there, I think it's worth a thought at the very least.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And so now you got me to my next part, which is another thing if you're like, hey, we can't afford social ads, right? Or we don't maybe it's not about the money, it's the time. We don't have anybody who's going to do these ads or what have you. But there are things you can do. So executives and salespeople should definitely be listed in key social media. When I say that, definitely LinkedIn, right? And where appropriate, things like Reddit or X, they should definitely have a presence in those places because that's where people might be searching for you. A thing that I want to make sure that everybody knows, in case you're wondering, a lot of folks say social's the new search, right? So people are searching less in Google, and they're searching for it in social. Or they're doing it both. They're searching in both places. So, you might be noticing that your Google Ads campaign or your paid search campaigns might be delivering less yield or have less volume. And that's because the appetite for gathering information is starting to be quenched through other means, and social media is one of them. So, with that in mind, back to our research project, it's a little bit of a necessary evil. So, what if you had a closed mind about it? You're like, you already have these ideas about whether social media is appropriate for your business or not. Then I'm encouraging you to open up your perspective because social media is definitely a part of the fabric of how people communicate with each other in different contexts. And it's becoming more pervasive and more ingrained in the social experience in most of the world, right? But it's a little bit of a different kind of environment for you to communicate in as a brand, as a company, and it's always changing. So, a few things for you to consider is, of course, there's a presence for your brand, your company, but there's also a presence for your people because that's really who will make the connections. Your people, the faces that make form your company, you as an executive, all of you are opportunities. Those are all opportunities for you to showcase yourself and bring attention to your thought leadership and like what makes you and your company so interesting. I would strongly encourage you not to be self-serving. Most of the time, that is not the most effective approach. Would you agree with that, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And even if you're a person, right, the clout chasing, hey, look at me, look
Yeah.
how great I am. Oh my gosh, I'm so amazing. It doesn't generally work for long, or it doesn't work for everyone, right? We all can't be, the super gorgeous person that just because you're hot and you put the video up, then you get the views, right? And we figured that out, right? Back in the day, probably before you were born, Matthew, right? When trade shows was the thing, right? And we had those huge tech trade shows. They had the booth babes, right? And you'd be like, how do I get people to come and look at my router, right? How do I get people to come and look at my universal power supply, right? These are not sexy products, okay? So where you can go get the Las Vegas dance girl, showgirls, and you pay her 2 grand to stand at your booth, and then they'd be like, oh, what's over there, right? Or you'd be like, I'm giving away free coffee or whatever, right? You got to, the enticements, and it worked great, and so it's not too much different like that, people. But in social media, it's got to be more authentic, right? If you want it to have a lasting, meaningful impact. And I think that was something that Matthew had commented about earlier, is that engagement, right? The realness and the authenticity of it is what really drives that good engagement. So having your salespeople, your business development people, all your thought leaders, if you've got engineers, those are all great opportunities for your company to build your brand or to amplify your brand in social media through those people. So how do you do that? Companies that are really great at it, like Microsoft's really great at this. IBM is getting good at it. There's companies, big companies out there of the like that they actually have a policy. They do training, and they actually establish guidelines for leaders, and those leaders get support. So if you're a small company, you're like, well, I can't afford that. But you can still come up with some guidelines for you, yourself, your staff, the business development people, and the other people who might be speaking about what you're doing in your company. And it could just be a few bullets, you know, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, right? Real simple. We talked about this last year. It's really important to kind of just have an approach as a company, and that you encourage your staff to do that. So me personally, my approach is really simple with my staff, and it's really only my client success people, which is to follow our clients, right? Follow our prospects, engage with them on social media in an appropriate manner. And if the company is putting stuff out, then you should share it, whenever you think about it, right? That's really simple. Everybody can do that. What do you think, Matthew? What else should we do, if anything?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think your point on authenticity was really important. And I really like your point because I hadn't thought about that before, is how I guess the newer generations are searching more on social media than they
They
are on
are.
Google.
Yeah.
Anytime
Yeah.
I want to learn something new, right, take up a new hobby or anything,
Hmm.
the first thing I go to is TikTok or Instagram for
Yeah.
videos of
Right.
people showing me how to do it.
Doing
Uh,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
important.
I
So that,
think
yeah,
a
please keep going.
big thing to think about in general, as I've looked at all of these social media accounts, it's the ones that succeed are the accounts or the companies that ask the question instead of just showing my product to people. I want to show them how I can be a part of this person's journey. And I
Cool.
think that that has like brought some of these companies to the next level on their social media game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you had showed me what John Deere did. You want to talk to everybody about that?
Oh yeah, John Deere was interesting because they leveraged some user-generated content. Um, that there was this like 9-year-old, I think, that is just a farming and tractor enthusiast, and I guess he went viral, and so John Deere invited them or invited him and I guess his parents or
Hmm.
whatever to
Hmm.
some of their facilities and showed him tractors. And this kid has a very unique personality, right? He knows everything about tractors. He's got a thick Southern accent, right?
So cute. Yeah.
And he ended up, I mean, they ended up getting, I mean, millions and
Millions of views.
millions of
Yep.
views and likes and
Yep.
saves and comments.
Yep.
People were saying this guy should be the spokesman for John Deere
For
because this,
John Deere. So cute.
yeah, because this is the
Yeah.
best engagement they've probably ever gotten.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great thing that
Let's
they
talk
did.
about it. Yeah. So, a lot of times I think for me, as a marketer, as the head of an agency, as a business owner myself, it's like, you get into these environments and there's always like this feeling or almost pressure of like, oh, you need to get clout, right? You need more followers, you need
Mhm.
more views, you need more likes, you need more shares, right? And if you don't have some threshold of whatever it is, then you're no good, right? You're not interesting, or maybe you're not relevant or whatever. And the thing is, the way I see it is we're all not going to be the most popular person on the planet, right? Not
Yes.
every social post is going to get a billion likes or 100,000
Oh,
or whatever,
100%.
right?
And a lot of
Right?
times, right, if it does succeed or go viral, it's 5 minutes
And
of fame.
still,
So,
it's
yeah.
still okay, right? Right, exactly. And even in the case of a John Deere where it went viral, it might not have led to more sales of John Deere right then and
Yeah,
there,
not
right?
necessarily. Right.
Because ultimately, if you're a business, your goal is to generate more revenue. And
Yeah.
so, engagement in social media may not necessarily translate directly into sales. And that's always a thing that a lot of my clients are asking about. They're like, I ran these social campaigns. I spent 10 grand and I got some web traffic, but I didn't get any leads, or I got very
Mhm.
few quality leads, or I got a bunch of form fills, or people downloaded a report, which is what I promoted, but
Right.
none of them, or very few of them, were really quality. So that's always a question: is how do I get quality leads? And that's why a lot of my clients who are smaller tech companies and even big tech companies, they're skeptical. The small ones are, especially, they're very skeptical about social media. The reason that the small ones are skeptical and the big ones aren't is because big companies have the resources and the revenue to invest in their brand. And
Mhm.
so Matthew's example was perfect, right? John Deere got a brand boost. Pow, 2 million people, right? And they're like, oh wow, right? And it just goes to the panache and the stature and the austerity of that,
Mhm.
long standing, top tier brand. If you're a small company like mine, or you're a small tech provider or whatever, where your brand reach is more limited, and that's okay because that's the nature of your business.
Mhm.
2 million views really probably won't help you because you don't have 2 million clients that you can serve at this juncture, or able to serve. So that's a big thing that I want to point out to everybody is, I always say, don't worry about um, going viral. Don't worry about having 45,000 followers on your page or whatever. I mean, great if you do what I suggested, $5 a day, right? On, your key platforms. Over time, your follower count will rise and rise and rise. But be targeted, right? It's all about quality, people, because I've seen this. I have actually seen clients spend millions of dollars and get millions of impressions and
Mhm.
millions of visits to their webpage, and like very few sales, very low yield on that spend. Because if you're going after clout, that may not turn into a return on invested ad spend. So I would definitely encourage you to be wise. It's all about quality. So it's all about targeting. Make sure that the audience that you've built when you go big on social is your audience. It's who you're trying to build brand awareness with, like we talked about. It's who you're trying to ultimately build a business relationship and turn that business relationship into revenue, right? At some point, it's going to turn into revenue. So you back to the question is, why should I be in social? So Matthew looked at 8 platforms. All the big guys, especially the tech guys, are in at least 5 of them, okay? Nobody's in all 8, or very few. Was there anybody in all 8?
No, I don't believe so. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Nobody's in all 8. So that's okay. You don't have to be in all 8. It's definitely the top 3, LinkedIn, Facebook, X is really common, but like as Matthew said, Instagram is becoming more popular. We saw on our list YouTube, becoming popular. Now, YouTube and TikTok are different platforms. And things like Rumble and Kick and Twitch and those kind of things are different platforms than say a LinkedIn or a Facebook. Those platforms, Rumble, YouTube, TikTok, are more around video, pre-recorded video,
Mhm.
though you can live on those guys. And then Twitch and Kick are really live streaming platforms. But they have growing reach, and brands have built awareness and engagement in those platforms. But you've got to be where you're producing video content and you're able to live stream in some cases. For the other guys, like a LinkedIn or a Facebook or Instagram, a Reddit, Blue Sky, even Truth, those guys are really optimized around a diverse type of content, but particularly like a post, right, which might have an image or an animated GIF or a video or something like that. So you got some more diversity, and that's where businesses often engage most. And it's easier, right? It's easier to kind of get the image, come up with some copy, create a routine, create a schedule to promote your brand. So back to the question of the event, is now the time to go big on social? So I'll answer this question in a couple of ways. The first one is ad costs are lower. There was a huge spend at the end of last year, so the ad costs were unnaturally high as a result of political spending. Now that that political spending is done, there's loads of ad inventory. There are lots of new networks out there, so there are more eyeballs looking at social media. So the cost per dollar spent is lower than it has been in 4 years. So if you're looking to do paid media, paid social media, now would be a great time to spend your dollars because you're going to get more yield for all your dollars invested. Number one. Number two is now a good time to go big on social. Maybe you're not ready to go big, but now is definitely a time to make sure you've got your brand on social because, as we mentioned earlier, social's the new search. The younger your audience are, Matthew's the next executive, right? Give him a few years. He'll be a CEO too, right? He's definitely a decision maker. He's definitely an influencer today. And so there are lots of young professionals like Matthew that, social media is really part of their fabric. And so that's your future executive that you're selling to. That might be your next IT decision maker. That systems analyst is going to be a younger person, probably a guy, right? So those things are really important. And those individuals are going to be in these social platforms. So now's the time to establish your footprint in those platforms and to like figure it out. It's a lot of it is just figuring it out. A lot of it is A/B testing. Even the best agencies in the world that have been doing this and this is what they do and they have a whole team, they're still A/B testing stuff and testing it out and optimizing and tweaking. So if you do ads, if you do paid social, yes, now is a good time to go big. If you don't do paid social, but you may be a little bit in social media, now is the time to make sure your brand is in all the key social media platforms. Here's what I would advise. it's this, you could use the same masthead, you could use the same icon, you can use the same description and the same name in every one of them, right? Now, some companies who are really sophisticated have unique brand presence in each. You don't have to do that. It's not faux pas, right? There's always an opportunity to improve, but it might be wise for you, no, even if you're a small company, build your presence wherever you can,
Mhm.
right? So if you could put a little shingle up and people can learn about your bakery or your consulting business or your small agency, then you should, right? So it won't take a ton of time if you've got those assets already in place, your masthead, your image icon, your company name, your description, that kind of stuff. It might only take you 20 or 30 minutes or less to set up your profile in each one. So I would strongly encourage you to do it. And so you might be like, but I'm not going to post every time, on all these platforms. Well, you don't have to. Sometimes it's a matter of just saving your brand so that somebody else doesn't get it. And Matthew, weren't there some examples of that where people like, was it which brand was it? Where somebody bootlegged
I
their
think
brand?
I
Was it
saw, I
Caterpillar
think it was on like,
or Slim Jim?
well, Slim Jim was one. It worked out for them though. But I think someone
Mhm.
was trying to impersonate like Lockheed or something on Blue Sky because they didn't have a they
Oh,
didn't have a
okay.
profile.
Yeah.
Slim
Yeah.
Jim is interesting though because it actually worked out for them. I think they were on Instagram,
Mhm.
but this random guy decided to make like a meme account of
For Slim
Slim
Jim.
Jim
Yeah.
stuff. And then he ended up getting like something like 500,000 followers, like super crazy good engagement. It was popping up on my Instagram every day.
Yeah.
Um, and Slim Jim ended up hiring this guy. And I think Slim Jim now, their official account has like 2 million or something on
Yeah.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. So this worked out for them, but the point
It doesn't
is
always.
that it doesn't always, right? And there that remember back in the day, see you're too young for this, but back in the day when the internet was dawning, right? In the 90s, um, people out there and they would go buy the domain, famous people's domain names, juliaroberts.com,
Oh.
lockheedmartin.com. Before every
Mhm.
company was like, buy your domains, there would be people out there, speculators that would go buy
Oh,
domains,
yeah. Yeah.
right? So then when you wanted to set up a website, you'd have to pay a ton of money. Well, the same is true for your social
Yeah.
account. Now, it's, you of course you can come up with all kind of flavors. Lockheed Martin 4736212, right? But
No one's
that's
gonna
not
trust that
ideal.
handle. Yeah.
Right. It's not ideal, right? You want your brand. So that's something. And you might be thinking, well, nobody's going to come and steal my brand, right? Because I'm a small company and nobody's thinking about me. Um, but you'd be surprised. So, definitely I would encourage you take a little bit of time, have your presence in as many platforms as you can, at least the big three, but maybe it's really more like five, right? It's more like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, and Reddit. Those would be the five that I would strongly encourage you guys to go and make sure you're in. You could get a free account on Hootsuite or oh God, what are the names? There are a bunch of them out there, and
Is
set
Hootsuite
up those
free?
accounts. Yeah, yeah, I think you could do free. Hootsuite can do free, and you can manage up to I think 10
Oh, I
social
see.
media accounts. And there are a bunch of social media management software out there that is, it's you can do free or it's like $20 a month. Not a big cost. You set them up, and then you can just kind of schedule your posts and kind of streamline if you don't have a ton of time. And like again, a lot of my conversations are geared towards small business owners, small business executives like myself. So you can definitely manage in all five. You don't have to be in all five and posting in all five. You can use a tool. And Hootsuite is old school too, you guys. I don't even know what the new guys are called. That tells you what generation I'm from. But there are loads of tools out there. Like SEMrush has tools. There are a ton of tools out there that help you manage your social media, and you just do it in one place. So that's one way to do it. In terms of your personal engagement, when you're talking about, hey, my salespeople, me, executives in my company, I don't want them spending, 5 or 10 hours a week on social media. I don't want them to be like number 47, who for a while was spending a lot of time on X, right? We don't want that. So, but you might say, hey, I want a very small amount of time. I call it snipering, and it's not bad, guys. Now, loads of social media experts out there will tell you, oh, you need to post so many times a week and you need to be really active and you have to jump into social media and you spend this much time and you do these things. And all those things are probably very true. And if you do many of those things, you probably will get more engagement. But the question is that engagement going to turn into a lead for your company? And that's really only a question that you can answer. And it's about you determining how to use your time. But what I will say is you do want to be active in these environments, particularly in the environments where you know your customers are, because they're going to look at that. And for your salespeople, especially, that you want them to have a rich, robust engagement in definitely LinkedIn, and in some degrees in some of the other platforms where appropriate, like a Reddit or an X. Those would be completely appropriate. Well, why? Well, guess what? When you send your salespeople out to trade shows, or they're networking, or they're placing dials, they're calling people, they're sending out emails, and they're doing their whole cold, relationship building like salespeople so greatly do. Well, what happens is when they have a good conversation with someone, people's threat level is really high, so they're always worried about being scammed, and they're worried about scammers, and they're worried about fraudulent activity. So even though they might have a great conversation with your salesperson, what are they going to do next? They're going to go and research your company. They're going to research that person, right? They're going to make sure you guys are real. And so your salespeople being present on multiple social media platforms with a consistent presence, with a rich, thought leadership led presence where they're sharing company posts, they're sharing information, they're appropriate, they're not, twerking on the TV or whatever. They're not in that account. They got a separate account for that stuff. Where they're in their mainstream account, they got the appropriate stuff. Then when they talk to the prospect and the prospect goes to look them up, then they're going to find something that aligns with them and your brand. So that's really, really important for you guys to do just from that. And you don't have to be doing it all the time, but you just got to do, honestly, I would say set a goal once a month. Okay. I know every social media expert out there is like turning over in their graves and they're going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said once a month. Okay. Let's set some realistic expectations for those of us who don't love social media. Once a month, make sure you post something good, relevant, useful for your audience. Not self-serving, not like, hey, look at me, look how great I am. Look what I won, look what I did. Like something useful. Hey, here's a statistic I found. Here's a study I found. Here's something that I saw. I react to something in the news, and share it. Add value, help share something that you think your audience would find useful, once a month. Because then after a year, you've got a few really juicy things. So when, people go and look you up, they have something good to look at. What else would you recommend, Matthew?
No, I think that is a major point is focus on quality of your content versus just frequency, right? Because why speak
Yeah,
if you have nothing to say? And
correct.
so um yeah, good social media does not fix your product or your service, right? So that's
Thank
that's going to
you.
be
Yeah.
your main focus. In fact, I just saw a really good ad, I thought, by Kellogg's this past
Hmm.
weekend.
Hmm.
And it was very nostalgic. It was like these parents with a camcorder taking a video of their kids all
Cute.
excited to get these, these cereal boxes with their toy in it. And
Cute. Hmm.
the tagline is Kellogg's feels like Saturday morning or something like that. And I
So
was like,
cute.
wow,
Yeah.
I can
Great
so
ad.
picture, my
Hmm.
childhood exactly like
Hmm.
that. And so I
Yeah.
went on Instagram and I was like, am I the only one that thought that this was a great ad? All of
Yeah.
the comments were just about how, I guess, Kellogg's has a lot of red 40 in their products and people are
Yes.
not happy with that.
Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
the comments, nothing about the video, just about like
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they're
How
boycotting Kellogg's.
interesting.
And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is like a great ad, I thought. But if
Yeah.
people aren't happy with your product or your service, then they don't really care if
That's
it's
a
a well
great
put
point.
together. They don't really care
Yeah.
if it's a well put together social media post or ad or anything. They're not getting what they want or what they feel they deserve for what they're
Hmm.
paying. And so
Hmm.
yeah, your brand image is still bad, right? So yeah.
That's such a great point. No,
It
actually,
doesn't, yeah, it
no,
doesn't
let's
fix,
pick that
it
apart.
doesn't fix
That's a
it. Yeah.
huge point because there's a lot of, especially B2B, right? A lot of
Hmm.
advertisers out there that, maybe their product is complicated to communicate.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the best service. Maybe they did something in the market and people are pissed off. And so they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to spend a lot of money on paid media to drive new people,
Hmm.
other people, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I got all these other folks that are unhappy with me, right? But like you said, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
how good your paid media is, folks, if you aren't in the business of building meaningful, true
Mhm.
human to human relationships, you're probably not going to have success with your demand generation activities because at the end
Mhm.
of the day, it's a human, right?
Yeah.
It's a
And
human
right,
that's going to buy your products.
everyone that looks at your social media now is like, oh, their product or service isn't good. I'm like, oh, maybe I
Right,
shouldn't be buying, Frosted Flakes
right.
anymore or
Right,
whatever.
right, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't say give in to cancel culture, but definitely, address, market issues if customers are asking you. And that takes us to social listening, right? Is this the time to go big on social? So if you are going bigger on social, be sure that you've got a resource, whether it's in-house or through an agency, that's going to be monitoring your social media pages and your platforms because you'll get comments, you'll get shout outs, you'll get tagged, there's a lot
Mhm.
of things. It might not be a ton of volume, but what is important is that there's a response. I mean, look, we're all guilty of it. But yesterday I had, at the end of last year, I had made a comment. I saw this great post from a marketing executive about the merger of IPG and, oh my gosh, what's the, Omnicom, right? Two huge agencies. And so this big merger. And so people were talking about, well, is there
Yeah.
going to be fallout? What does this mean? And so I made a comment, and my focus is always small businesses, right? I'm always keen about, what does this mean for small and mid-sized businesses? How do you serve them? How do you support them? And so that was what my comment was about. And so I made a post on my own personal profile and was like, hey, I really loved this discussion, that this person fostered with their post, and I want to bring everybody's attention to the comment about small clients. And so I did. I got a response from many mangoes, right? Yesterday, right? But it was a really smart comment. And this account had like 9,000 followers, right? Pretty cool. And so that's kind of some of the things, like make sure you're doing your social listening because it would be a bad look, right? If I didn't respond to many mangoes thoughtfully
Mhm.
because, that the person who owns that account was engaged with what I had to say and asked me a question, and I thoughtfully answered that question. And the more you do that, the more you get an engaged audience and you have again a good look in social media. So, all right.